Guruve Gaura Chanjaya Radhikaya Tadale Krishnaya Krishna Bhaktaya Tadabhaktaya Namo Namaha Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhu Bhaivacha Patitanam Bhavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasari Gaura Bhaktavinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Dhanavad Pranam, devotees. So I'm going to make an attempt to try to answer a kind of group of questions that came in. It wasn't all from the same person, but they were not long questions either. Some of them I've kind of dealt with perhaps in a different presentation. But I'm just giving short answers, so there's no harm in reiterating something if it will make it more clear for myself, because as I've mentioned many times, I always do these things also mostly for my own edification. So the first question, I'm just paraphrasing because I don't have my phone in front of me, and I'm not being lazy here, but I'm also trying to work in the interest of time. So one of the questions was about the difference, I think, between devotees who have more of a, what they describe as a heartfelt approach to bhakti, as opposed to devotees who have more of a mind or mental approach to bhakti. So, this is addressed by Srila Jiva Goswami Pada in Bhakti Sandarbha. And he mentions that there are, according to the different natures of different persons, their own karmic portfolios, etc., and their bhakti sanskars, means their particular bhakti DNA, for lack of a better word, how they have unfolded over the course of some lives in bhakti, they may have different moods. So one path is called the Vichar Pradhan Marg, and the other path is called Ruchi Pradhan Marg. So I think it's maybe Anuchet 202 or something, I cannot remember directly, in Bhakti Sandarbha. He speaks about this. And he says that there are some persons who are inclined to the path of Vichar. Now, Vichar is a Vedic concept, and it means that one analyzes especially 6 elements when they're approaching any particular theme or understanding or tattva or anything. They approach through this process of Vichar. So it doesn't always play out in a black and white way, step 1, step 2, step 3, but the totality of these 6 things end up being considered. First one is called Upakrama. Upakrama means, what is the opening statement? What is the theme? What's being discussed? The other one is Upasanghara. What was the conclusion of everything? Abhyas means there is a theme that connects that opening and that closing. So recently I've been doing some classes on the first 3 verses of Srimad Bhagavatam, and the Upakrama verse would be Janmadhyasya Yata Anvayaritharachas, and the Upasanghara verse would be Nama Sankirtaniyasa Sava Papa Pranasanam, which is the last verse of Srimad Bhagavatam. In between those 2 verses, there is a consistent theme. That's called the Abhyas, and the consistent theme is a series of narrations pointing to the conclusion stated in the opening verse, that Janma Adi Rasa Yata, I've explained these things before, that the essential thing is the whole creation has come from Bhagavan. That's one perspective. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur Pad is also mentioned Janma Adi Rasa. Adi Rasa means the love between Radha and Krishna. So the object of supreme worship is this Adi Rasa, the prem or the love between Radha and Krishna. So Srimad Bhagavatam is actually a manifestation of the mature realizations of Sri Vyasa Dev in this manner. That he had previously in other sastras described Radha and Krishna, but he had not given perspective to the prem of Radha and Krishna and its uniqueness. So Srimad Bhagavatam is dedicated to that. So the opening verse and the concluding verse, which states that the sequel to Krishna's Leela, which will be Gaur Leela, fully expands the flip side of the coin of what he presented regarding Shri Krishna, Srimati Radhika, their love. That'll be completely manifested in Gaur Leela, where it becomes Ordodja, means it becomes magnificently available and open by the combined mercy of Radharani and the Icha or desire of Sri Krishna. And they combine in one form. So abhyas means the theme that runs between the opening and the closing. Apurvata. Apurvata means there should be something unprecedented about the statements. Like in Srimad Bhagavatam, what's unprecedented is that Vyasadeva had not previously, though compiling all kinds of sastra, from dividing the 4 Vedas and the Upanishads, compiling the Aranyakas to the various Puranas and disseminating them among disciples, etc. But Srimad Bhagavatam, he realized in his own maturity, Bhakti Yogena Manasi Samyak Pratileya Malaya Pashat Purusham Puranam, right? So he realized in his own maturity after speaking with Narada Muni. So now unprecedented realizations and statements are made in Srimad Bhagavatam regarding this highest spiritual attainment of Krishna praying. Then, phalam, there should be some fruit, which is discussed. What is the result of having realized, understood, or practiced and come to the realization of this particular theme or topic? And then, artavad. Artavad means explanatory verses like Eti Chamsa Kalam Pumsam Krishna Stu Bhagavan Swayam. It's the Paribhramita verse of Bhagavatam. Krishna is Swayam Bhagavan, etc. Right? So verses like that and other things which give explanation. They're called artavad. And then upapati. Upapati means things which are similes, examples, narrations, or stories which illustrate the point are called upapati. Right? So some persons have a natural inclination in the path of bhakti to utilize, not so much in a conscious way even, because many people may not even know about these 6 sort of things, but they utilize this methodology of analyzing things step by step. And for them, that nourishes their faith, because Shraddha Anusari, our progress in bhakti, follows our Shraddha, right? So if these things, for those persons inclined in that way, nourish and stir their faith, then that is a very good thing. All right? Then you have those who are, based on their bhakti sanskars, more inclined towards experiencing the sweetness or the taste which is inherent in bhakti. So in Harinam, in Harikatha, in Seva, to Hari Guru and Vaishnavas, there's an embedded sweetness there. And that sweetness alone becomes nourishing to the unfoldment of someone's, step-to-step iterations in bhakti. So for those persons, it is called Ruchi Pradhan Marg. Now, these are very subtle, nuanced things. So we cannot make blanket statements about various kinds of people. So you cannot say, and in fact, it's not a black and white distinction, because there are many people who, though they may be inclined towards vichar, certainly also have some taste in the sweetness of bhakti, and vice versa. There are some people who, though predominantly having a taste in the sweetness of bhakti, certainly are not doing so without some consideration of vichar. So it's not a clearly black and white thing. There's only Gyani type devotees and sweetness, rasa type devotees. And couching that in English, terminology, those who are approaching more from the mind or those who are approaching more from the heart. So we want to be careful to understand that everybody has a unique DNA, and their unfoldment in bhakti is based on that. Praktanaka aduniki chasti yatsat bhakti vasana. So their ability to progress in bhakti and to develop a particular taste, a particular rasa, everything is based in that particular, previous impressions and so forth and so on. This is their nature. This is their bhakti DNA, so to speak, right? So that was one question. Why do some people have more of an analytical approach in bhakti, while others have more of a sort of more, I don't know what the word would be. They said like a heartfelt, but I'm reluctant to use that word, because anybody practicing bhakti has to be practicing from the heart. And the mind and the heart should not be separated. In fact, there's a very beautiful statement of Srimati Radharani speaking to Sri Krishna at Kurukshetra, mentioned in the 15th chapter of Madhya Lila, of Chaitanya Charitamrita. Anya Ridoy Moraman, Moramana Vrindavan, Mani Vani Eko Korijani. That my mind and my heart are not two different things. And in this case, Srimati Radhika is expressing to Krishna, Mani Vani Eka Korijani. My mind and heart are Vrindavan. And that if you want to show mercy to us, then you should place your two lotus feet on the chariot of my heart and return to Vrindavan. So we should not have the idea that there's that kind of actual separation. That some people are more mental, some people are more heartfelt. Really, in the practice of bhakti, heart and mind should become unified in desire to obtain a seva of Shri Shri Mahaprabhu and Radhakrishna Yugal. Other question. How is it possible to understand suffering? And I have addressed this before. I certainly know I've addressed this before. To understand suffering of the residents of the spiritual world. For instance, the example was given why the Pandavas had to suffer because the person wrote in their question that the residents of the spiritual world certainly don't have karma, or the eternal associates, he said, have no karma, so why are they suffering? Right? So, and then he made mention of the fact that I made mention, so he did hear, I guess at some point, about the gopis suffering when Krishna leaves Vrindavan or whenever they're in a mood of deep separation. So I've also mentioned, certainly before, that we cannot understand the experiential nature of emotion in the spiritual paradigm or in the spiritual world because we've not had that experience in full yet. The closest experience that we have had to spiritual emotion is the connection with Sri Guru. Now, obviously, I cannot speak for every single person because I'm not omniscient or omnipotent, so I don't know what everybody's inner experiences are, but I'm speaking in a general way here, that certainly, unless one has come to the stage of bhavavast, or maybe even deeply into asakti, then the mood, the spiritual emotional content is not really in the purview of the jiva so much at that point. It becomes somewhat in ruchi, more in asakti, and then of course with the descent of Sarup Shakti in bhavavast, then there's realization. So it's difficult to understand or perceive how spiritual emotion is working. So our acharyas have mentioned, even in the depth of the greatest fire of separation of gopis, there's so much ananda, so much bliss. So how we can understand that from a material perspective is very difficult. So it's an experiential reality. Now I mentioned we have some ability to have a drop of that understanding through any deep heart connection with Sri Guru. Because Sri Gurudev is the first experience for any jiva they have of unconditional transcendental love. Kaitavam rahitam prema na prema manushloke. So, Sastric statement is there that in the material world, there is no real prem. Right? English for prem is like love, you could say, but it doesn't really adequately cover because prem has so much unfoldment and so much flowering, the actual term prem. So, you can't really make a simple statement prem means love. But in the material world, it's saying that there is no prem. Because in the material world, kaitava, the tendency of self-interest is so thick that any two people falling in love is really based on their mutual self-interest, right? It's not unconditional. There are definitely conditions, right? Secondly, the nature of spiritual love is such that when we do have that experience, just like I was mentioning in the case of the relationship of guru and disciple, if the disciple is very, very sincere, they now experience someone loving them in an unconditional way, and of course we're unfolding to reciprocate that love with Sri Guru. But of course if the disciple has become some mature, then they can understand the simultaneous presence of the ananda of remembering, especially if Sri Guru has entered samadhi, remembering the sweetness of the affectionate dealings with Sri Guru, as well as the illumination in the heart of Srila Gurudev's transcendental teachings. So whenever those two things come in contact, a simultaneous mood of separation comes, and an astounding kind of bliss comes in the heart, remembering the mercy and kripa, which means the same thing, that was shown by Sri Gurudev to that Sishya, to that disciple. And the illumination has taken place in their heart as a result. So this is some small drop of the example of how a feeling of suffering, how much I miss my Guru Parapadma, and same time the ananda that flows from remembrance of Srila Gurudev's relationship, right? So this is the first kind of drop. So if that is completely realized, that's what the experience is in the spiritual world. So you can't try to intellectually or mentally or by kalpana, means imagination, try to figure out what it is. Just like I mentioned, we cannot figure out what the nature of intimate dealings of Radha and Krishna are via our intellectual or imaginary capacity. Oh, well, it must be like the same thing we do here, but it's purified. No. All the dealings between Radha and Krishna are composed of prema. And prema undergoes transformations that produce various kinds of anubhavs, sattvic bhavs, etc. So it is not a question of a purified version of what we experience here, because what we experience here is a perverted reflection, but it is not at all similar. And our acharyas have mentioned, of course, in Chaitanya Charitamrita, the mention of what is iron and what is gold is one analogy that's used. So no, there isn't any real comparison, right? So another question was, how is it that, which was an interesting question actually, how is it that Kubja, who had the ability to have a direct contact with Sri Krishna, how could that be if the acharyas, which our acharyas have written, the kind of mood that Kubja, and if anybody does not know who Kubja is, she was the hunchback woman whom Sri Krishna, when he entered Mathura, he saw her. In her previous life, she was Shurpanakha, the sister of Ravan. And she had a desire to marry Lord Ram. And of course, many events unfolded, and in the unfolding of those events, she was disfigured by Lakshman under the order of Ram, because she tried to attack Sita, who she thought was the cause of her inability to marry Lord Ram, right? So she then took again appearance, right, as Kubja. And Kubja means like hunchback, right? So in this way, that inner desire she had as Surpanakha, right, that was fulfilled in Krishna Lila. Because the Lord, Bhava Grahi Janardhan, he takes the essence of any mood offered to him. So because she had this desire for conjugal dealings, Krishna took that. Now the unique thing here is not that Kubja, or in the case of Surpanakha, they had just ordinary lust. Because they only had that attraction for Lord Ram and for Sri Krishna. You understand? Therefore, there was not a question of lusty desires, mundane sense, for any man. They had no other desire for anyone else except Sri Krishna. So, Bhagavan reciprocates. So, Sri Krishna reciprocated with her, but the acharyas have described that rati is called sadharana. So the word sadharana means like common, but it doesn't mean common in the sense, therefore every lusty person who has multiple lusty attractions and then has one lusty attraction towards Krishna would be equivalent to what is Kubja. So it doesn't mean that. At the same time, it means that because Kubja's attraction to Krishna was dominated by her own self-interest, it was sadharana. It was not transcendental. It had no ability to bring Krishna under control. Therefore, our acharyas also have said it is not really rati, meaning really love, right? So, but the unique feature of both Shurpanakha and Kubja was their lust was one-pointed. So, it's mentioned, even if a person has attraction towards Bhagavan in the mood of calm, right? Or any other means, that if it's single-pointed, one-pointed, will produce the effect of reciprocation from Bhagavan. So this is a very good question, because Kubja's situation is very unique, and it is difficult to kind of understand how somebody who could simply be very lusty could have attracted the attention and got reciprocation from Sri Krishna. Let me see. I don't have my phone in front of me. I'm trying to remember other questions that were on there. It's a good exercise since I'm getting old to try to remember things. What is the understanding of approaching Lord Nityananda in order to get Braj Prem, especially Manjari Bhav? So, it's clearly mentioned, without Sri Nityananda Kripa, no one can approach Sriman Mahaprabhu. And without approaching Mahaprabhu, no one can approach Gaur. No one can approach Brajadam. Right? If you will into Gaur Lila and dive deeply into Gaur Ras and deeply into Gaur Lila, you'll find yourself arising in the Antaranga, means the inner circle of Sri Radha Madhav. Right? So it will take quite a while to explain the nuances here. Even in the name Radha Madhav, very special nuances are there. Krishna, when he's in the mood of Anukul, Dira Lalit Nayak, and Srimati Radhika is Swadina Bhatrika Nayika, then this Radha and Madhav is given the name for Krishna at that time. So very deep considerations are there. That's why the bhajan Jaya Radha Madhava Jaya Kunja Vihari. Why such a deep bhajan? Right? Because very deep implications are here. Right? So, without the mercy of Lord Nityananda, because he is called Bhakta Swarup, right? What is this verse? I'm thinking. Bhakta Rupa Sarupakam, Bhaktavataram Bhaktakyam, Namami Bhakta Shaktikam. Right? That Sri Nityananda Prabhu, he is the Bhakta Swarup. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, I've explained this thing, I think, so many times on different question and answer sessions or something. But Mahaprabhu was the Bhakta Rup, the combined form of Radha Krishna and the embodiment of the highest form of prema. Right? Nityananda Prabhu was called Bhakta Swarup. So Swarup means the nature or inner revelation of something. He is the manifestation as a Kanda Guru Tattva, the principle which reveals the Bhakta Rup. Understand? So without Sri Nityananda Prabhu, no one can really approach any mood of Braj. You understand? Because without the revelation of Mahaprabhu, there's no access to the mood of Vrindavan. It is the Ordorja Lila. It is the magnificent manifestation of Braj that accommodates anyone. Like Patra Patra Nakare Vichar. If you have the proper container, you don't have a proper container, Mahaprabhu didn't take this consideration. In other words, who was qualified, unqualified, he did not take this consideration in this desire to distribute the beauty of service to the beauty of Radha Krishna's love. Unata Ujjwala Rasa Swabhakti Sriyam. The word Sriyam here means beauty. The beauty of Unata Ujjwala Rasa is the ability to serve that mood. That is what Mahaprabhu came to distribute. As well, Chari Bhakti Ras, other rasa also distributed there, but primarily this mood of Palyadasi Bhav, or the mood of service to the Srimati Radharani and her love for Sri Krishna. Right? So, without Sri Nityananda, nobody can have revelation of this thing. So that Akhanda Guru Tattva feature of Lord Nityananda appears also as Vyasti Guru. Because also you should understand that Lord Nityananda is not different from Baladev Tattva. And Baladev Tattva is the embodiment of Seva Vastu Seva Vritti. Both the substance and the tendencies of service. He's Savior Bhagavan. He's the Vaibhav Prakash of Krishna. Vaibhav here means he's Bhagavan, but with a different mood. What mood? Service to Bhagavan. So he's the God of mood of service. So that means all kinds of services. So in every single rasa, the presence of Seva Vritti, the tendency of service, is there. So that's a feature of Baladev Tattva. Hence Nityananda Tattva. In the matter of conjugal love, then that feature takes the shape of Ananga Manjari, the younger sister of Srimati Radhika. You understand? So in every single rasa, that mood of service, the attitude of serving, Seva Vritti, is there. and the substance of service. Sandhini Shakti is also manifested from Baladev Tattva. So the substance of our bhakti, right? The substance, the serve, the body obtained by the sadhaka in their perfection will be composed of Sandhini Shakti. So all of this is related to Nityananda Tattva. So no way to approach the inner chamber of the mood of Braj Seva, or any Seva for that matter, without Sri Nityananda Tattva. You understand? But also we want to be careful because we should understand that whole 5 truths, right? What is this? Bhakti Rupa Surupakam, Bhakta Avataram, Advaitacharya, Bhakti Shakti Gadadhar, and the pure devotee, Srivas. So all of that has to be understood. So hopefully that answers Prabhuji's questions, that yes, Nityananda Prabhu is indispensable in moving towards even Braja Bhakti and even the mode of Paliyadasi Bhav to Radhika. Then the blessing of Sri Nityananda Prabhu is completely indispensable. Let me think. Any other questions? If I can't, then I'll just have to end here and I'll pick up where I left off. Yeah, so I think that's conclusive for today. And I'll grab my phone the next time and be able to look at the rest of the questions that's there. Of course, I have to go from person to person. But what I may do, if they're short questions, some people's questions, it's pretty detailed and specific to that question, and therefore I may do just a session on that question. Where there are shorter answers, like some of the answers today, I can link things together. Just taking the questions and linking them together. Anyway, Dandavat Pranam, Vanchakalpaturvishya Kripa Shinduvevacha Patitana Pavanevyo Vaishnavevyo Namo Namaha. Jai Radhe Radhe.